The Secret Beneath the Old Barn, a Suburban Conspiracy. It was a crisp Monday morning in Maple Grove, a sleepy suburban enclave where the biggest scandal in recent memory was a debate over whether mailboxes should be painted eggshell or ivory. From my kitchen window, I expected the usual sights: squirrels raiding the bird feeder, Mrs. Larson power-walking in her neon tracksuit, maybe my tabby, Whiskers, hacking up a hairball in the azaleas. What I didn't expect was a bulldozer emblazoned with Maple Grove HOA enforcement, rumbling into our backyard. Two men in high-vis vests were hammering stakes into the ground like they were marking us for eviction. My wife, Ellen, let out a shriek. I dropped my coffee mug, ceramic shards scattering across the linoleum. And my father-in-law, Hank, stormed out in a faded plaid bathrobe, his old hunting rifle slung over his shoulder, muttering, "They're not getting away with this." Maple Grove was the kind of place where conformity was king. The HOA, led by the insufferable Gerald Thompson, policed everything from lawn height to the precise shade of front door paint. Our old barn, a weathered structure Hank built decades ago, was their latest target. It wasn't some cookie-cutter shed from a hardware store. It was a sturdy log building with a tin roof, iron hinges, and a faint smell of cedar and gun oil. Hank called it his retreat, a place to tinker and reminisce about his days hunting deer in the woods that used to surround this now-tame neighborhood. To Gerald, it was an eyesore, a violation of Article 12, subsection B, non-compliant auxiliary structures. By the time I got outside, Gerald was on our porch, clipboard in hand, his comb-over gleaming under the morning sun. "Good morning, Tom," he said, his voice dripping with fake cheer. "We're here to remove that unauthorized barn. Demolition starts today." Ellen, still in her pajamas, blinked at him. "You mean the barn? It's been here forever." "Technically," Gerald sneered, "it's a non-compliant structure. You were warned." He wasn't wrong about the warnings. We'd gotten letters for months, each one more threatening than the last. But the barn predated the HOA, built when Maple Grove was just farmland. Ellen tried to argue. "This is a mistake. That barn was here before your precious bylaws." Gerald just shrugged as the crew unloaded their tools. A backhoe growled to life, its claw glinting. The neighbor's kid, perched on a tricycle, started wailing, as if sensing the chaos to come. Then Hank burst out the back door, rifle in hand, looking like he'd just stepped out of a western. He didn't aim at Hank, wasn't unhinged, but he held it with the confidence of a man who'd once stared down a coyote and won. "You touch that barn," he growled, "and I'll make this neighborhood regret it." The crew froze. The foreman, a guy named Randy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, glanced at Gerald. "Sir, we're just following orders. You can file a dispute." "There won't be anything left to dispute if you tear it down," Hank snapped. "You think you can erase history because it doesn't match your pastel palette?" Gerald strutted forward, his khakis pressed to perfection. "I warned you, Hank. That barn's a violation. Zero compliance. This is what happens when people think they're above the rules." "That barn's older than your hairpiece, Gerald," Hank shot back. "It's got more soul than this whole subdivision." The argument escalated fast. Hank shouted about freedom. Gerald recited bylaws like a preacher quoting Leviticus. Ellen started crying, and I paced, trying to figure out how to stop this without anyone getting arrested. Then Hank clutched his chest and collapsed. Time stopped. I dropped to my knees, shouting, "Hank, call 911. Ellen screamed, and the crew backed off like they'd stumbled into a crime scene. Paramedics arrived, wheeling Hank away as he mumbled something over and over. I leaned in, expecting last words, but he wasn't saying goodbye. His voice was hoarse, urgent. They can't know what's under it. In that moment, our HOA dispute turned into something straight out of a spy novel. The barn wasn't just a barn anymore. It was hiding something Hank was willing to risk his life to protect. At the hospital, Ellen sat pale and shaking, clutching a dog-eared magazine she wasn't reading. Our daughter, Sarah, was glued to her phone, Googling whatever Operation Nightshade might mean. I kept replaying Hank's words, wondering what could be buried under a barn in the middle of suburbia. That night, curiosity got the better of us. Sarah, armed with a flashlight and 2 mini energy drinks, convinced me and Ellen to investigate. We slipped past the HOA's flimsy caution tape and pried open the barn's heavy door. Inside, it smelled like sawdust and old leather. We found fishing gear, a mounted buck's head, and hidden under a tarp, a floor hatch we'd never noticed. It was locked, rusted shut. I grabbed a crowbar and heaved until it gave way. A ladder descended into darkness. Sarah shone her light down. Is that a basement? It wasn't a basement. It was a concrete-lined cellar, narrow and cold. At the far end was a workbench piled with yellowed papers, maps, and a metal case stamped with faded red letters, property of U.S. government. Do not open. Naturally, we opened it. Inside was a microfilm reel, a pouch of what looked like old war bonds, and a sealed envelope labeled Operation Nightshade, classified. Sarah gasped. I just stared, heart pounding. Okay, I whispered. This isn't about a barn anymore. Headlights swept the yard outside. SUV doors slammed. And then Mr. Peterson, the retired accountant from 2 houses down, stepped into the doorway and said, "You shouldn't have found that." The hospital room smelled like bleach and overcooked oatmeal. Hank lay in bed, a tangle of wires taped to his chest, his snores competing with the steady beep of the heart monitor. Ellen flipped through a home decor magazine, her eyes glazed over. Sarah, as usual, was hunched over her phone, muttering about Operation Nightshade, and whether it was some obscure CIA program or just a bad spy novel title. I couldn't stop thinking about that cellar, the metal case, and Mr. Peterson's cryptic warning. The guy we'd always thought was just obsessed with his rose garden had looked at us like we'd unearthed a national secret. When Hank finally woke, he didn't waste time. No, how am I doing? Or where's my coffee? He sat up, wincing, and barked, "Where's the case?" Ellen tried to shush him. "Hank, you need to rest." Sarah rolled her eyes. "He's awake, not dead. Let him talk." "I asked where the damn case is," Hank said louder. I unzipped my backpack and pulled it out, the metal glinting under the fluorescent lights. Hank opened it, checked the contents microfilm, bonds, envelope and leaned back, satisfied, like he'd just confirmed the world was still spinning. "You kids ever hear of Operation Nightshade?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. We shook our heads. Sarah had a Wikipedia page open, but Hank waved it off. "Forget that internet nonsense. They only tell you what they want you to know." He spoke the word government, like it left a bad taste in his mouth, and that's when I knew he wasn't spinning a yarn. Hank explained that back in the 1970s, when Maple Grove was still mostly cornfields, he'd been approached, not recruited, just approached by a man in a cheap suit who smelled like stale cigarettes. The guy wasn't official, not in the way you'd expect, but he had credentials and a job. Turned Hank's barn into a covert listening post. It wasn't a bunker or an armory, just a quiet spot to monitor radio signals that might be bouncing through civilian channels. Soviet chatter, maybe, or something weirder. The tech was clunky by today's standards, but back then, it was top secret. Why leave it there all these years? Sarah asked. Why not tear it down? Hank sighed. Because I didn't know what it was still picking up. Orders stopped coming, but the signals didn't. I logged every one. Some were just noise. Others weren't. That night, we went back to the barn. We had to. The envelope contained coordinates and a string of numbers that looked like frequency codes. Hank said the radio gear was still down there, hidden behind a false wall in the cellar. But the moment we stepped inside, something felt wrong. The door was ajar, the lock splintered. Sarah whispered, "Someone's been here." We moved carefully, lights off, footsteps soft. The hatch to the cellar was open, and the air smelled faintly of gasoline. One of the old fishing nets on the wall had been slashed. Hank crouched by the workbench, checked the hidden panel, and froze. It had been pried open. The equipment, an ancient radio, some cables, and a black box with no labels was gone. They beat us to it, Hank said, staring at the space. Who? I asked. He didn't answer, but his silence said enough. Back at the house, things got worse. Taped to our front door was an envelope from the HOA. A citation for tampering with evidence, a $2,000 fine, and a notice that the demolition was rescheduled for tomorrow, this time with county approval. Gerald Thompson had pulled strings. We were out of time. The next morning, while I called every lawyer in the phone book and Ellen drafted a complaint letter so fierce it could have started a fire, Hank made a call. He wouldn't say who was on the other end, just muttered, "Old friend. Owes me." At noon, the backhoe rolled in again. Gerald was there, sporting a shiny new badge that read District Compliance Officer. He handed me a stack of papers, smirked, and nodded to the foreman. Start with the roof. Clean tear down. Then 3 black SUVs pulled up. They didn't park, they surrounded the barn. Men in suits stepped out, no badges, just sharp shoes and sunglasses. One, Gerald handed a folded document. He read it, his face turning gray, and walked away without a word. The lead suit, an older guy with a limp, approached Hank and saluted. Henry Larson? Hank nodded. Your file's been reactivated. We'll take it from here. Reactivated? Ellen asked, clutching her cardigan like it was a shield. The man turned to her. Your father wasn't just running a relay. He was the last link to a classified domestic listening program. The tech stolen from that barn is being used by an unauthorized party. We need his help to find it. Hank, for once, looked caught off guard. You're serious? Deadly. The suits moved into the barn with briefcases and strange tools, treating it like a crime scene and a museum. The backhoe never touched a shingle. Gerald stood across the street, mouth agape, as his authority crumbled. That night, over meatloaf and uneasy silence, Hank finally cracked a smile. They thought it was just a barn. Didn't know they were standing on a Cold War relic. Sarah passed him the microfilm, now digitized by the suits. There's another coordinate here, she said. Edge of town, by the old water tower. Hank's eyes gleamed. Looks like we're not done yet. The neighborhood changed overnight. Mrs. Larson, who once campaigned for quieter sprinklers, was now spying on us with binoculars. Drones hummed overhead. Mail arrived already opened. The cul-de-sac became a pressure cooker, with rumors flying, buried treasure, alien tech, even a theory that Hank was secretly a retired spy novelist. To ease the tension and maybe dig for answers, we hosted a barbecue, dubbed Operation Potluck by Hank. We promised burgers, beer, and a patriotic surprise. The turnout was instant. Retirees in golf shirts, kids in soccer jerseys, and a guy named Carl who brought a guitar and claimed to be the HOA's morale officer. Sarah and I worked the grill while Ellen handed out buttons reading Barn Lives Matter, which made half the guests shuffle awkwardly to the other side of the yard. Hank held court at a picnic table, spinning tales of Cold War intrigue like he was auditioning for a podcast. Ever wonder why no birds fly near that water tower? He asked, chomping a hot dog. EMP tests fried their little brains. Poor things never had a chance. Some laughed. Others took notes. Carl, the guitar guy, kept circling the lemonade table without drinking, his eyes on Hank. Sarah nudged me. He's been here too long and hasn't touched the food. He's listening. As the sun set, Hank stood, clinking a fork against his plate. I'm not gonna lie to you folks, he said. You've seen the suits, heard the whispers. It's worse than you think. A gasp rippled through the crowd, though it might have been someone choking on coleslaw. Back in the 70s, I let the government use my barn to listen for signals. We didn't know what we were hearing, but we logged it all. Now someone's stolen that tech, and they're not with the government. They knew exactly what to take. The only ones who can stop them are us. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the kids stopped running. Gerald, sipping iced tea, nearly choked. The HOA called an emergency meeting that night in Mrs. Larson's basement. Gerald, sweating through his polo, labeled us a community threat and waved around printouts of online polls titled, Are the Millers Spies? And is Hank a secret agent? But the suits were already ahead, setting up a new listening post in the barn. Hank helped calibrate it, using his old logs. The key was the frequency, as if we could catch a matching signal, we could track the stolen tech. Sarah, bored and brilliant, had been scanning local weather radar archives. She spotted a strange pulse, always from the northeast, near the old water treatment plant. It matched Hank's logs perfectly. The suits confirmed it wasn't random noisy, it was a transmission, short bursts of encoded data, just like the Cold War signals. Whoever had the tech was using it, and they were close. The suits planned a quiet sweep of the water treatment plant. No sirens, no uniforms, just a scouting mission. But Hank had other ideas. We're not sneaking in like spies, he said. We're going in like neighbors. So, the next day, under the guise of an HOA sanitation audit, half the neighborhood piled into minivans and headed out. Sarah, me, Hank, and a few surprisingly gutsy moms from the PDA led the charge. The suits trailed in unmarked vans, keeping their distance. The water plant was a relic, abandoned since the 90s, its pipes rusted and windows boarded. Inside, it was silent, but the air had a faint buzz, like static you could feel. In a back room, Behind a maze of old gauges, we found it, the stolen black box, hooked to a car battery, wires snaking to an antenna jammed through a cracked skylight. And sitting next to it, typing on a dusty laptop, was Carl, the guitar-strumming morale officer from the barbecue. He looked up, not startled, just disappointed. "You have no idea what this thing can do," he said, his voice calm, almost reverent. Hank shook his head. "Carl, you sing wagon wheel like a wounded cat. Should have known you were up to something." Carl didn't flinch. He nodded at the box. "It still works. I patched it with parts from a ham radio and an old CB rig, but it's running." "Do you know what that means?" "It means you're in deep trouble," I said, stepping forward, trying to sound tougher than I felt. The suits were outside, radios crackling, ready to move in. Carl just smiled. "It means the signal never stopped. We thought we were the only ones listening, but something's been answering back." He pointed to the laptop, where a waveform danced in rhythmic spikes. Sarah leaned in, her eyes widening. "That's not noise," she whispered. "It's structured data, and it's accelerating." "What does that mean?" I asked, my only spy knowledge coming from late-night cable movies. "It means they know we're listening," Carl said. "And now they're listening to us." The suits stormed in, cuffing Carl with practiced ease and seizing the gear. He didn't resist, just kept that eerie smile, like he'd already won. As they let him out, he called back to Hank. "You heard it first, but you didn't dig deep enough. It's not just Cold War chatter. It's bigger." The ride home was quiet. We weren't just dealing with Hank's past or a stolen radio anymore. It felt like we'd stumbled into something ancient, something that hadn't died when the Berlin Wall fell. Back at the house, the neighborhood was on edge. The suits installed sensors around the barn, questioned neighbors, and kept their faces blank. Hank got a visit from a woman in a tailored suit. Her badge flashed too fast to read. She spoke to him alone for an hour, then left. He sat on the porch afterward, staring at the horizon. "They're not shutting it down," he said finally. "They're expanding it." "Expanding what?" Sarah asked. "The program. Old networks, listening posts, digital trackers. They think something's out there, and they don't know what. That's what scares them." The HOA, desperate to regain control, called a tribunal in the community center, a sterile room smelling of air freshener and regret. Gerald unveiled a PowerPoint titled, "The Barn, a Threat to Suburban Harmony," complete with doctored photos of the barn glowing like a haunted house. He ranted about shingle codes and inappropriate rustic aesthetics. Then Hank stood, holding a single sheet of paper, the original 1971 HOA charter, signed by the founder, exempting his barn from all future rules. Gasps echoed. Gerald stammered, "That's not valid. We revised the bylaws." "Not legally," Hank said. "No board vote, no city filing. Your rules are just hot air." A quiet board member, who only ever spoke about recycling schedules, stood. I motioned to dissolve the board and hold new elections. The vote was unanimous. Gerald stormed out, shouting, "You've won nothing, Hank. I know what's under that barn." Hank smirked. "You lost to a guy who doesn't own a laptop, Gerald. Sit down." But the next morning, a handwritten letter appeared in our mailbox, no return address. "They'll come for it again, not for what's below, but for what's waking above." Hank read it, packed a bag, and announced he was heading to the water tower. "Signals are getting stronger," he said. "We need to understand them before someone else does." Sarah and I went with him. Ellen stayed behind, reluctantly, to keep the house from becoming a rumor mill. At the barn, the suits were installing new receivers when a knock came. Another agent, another message. "There's been a reply. Real time." Hank opened a sealed envelope marked Priority Intercept. Inside was a log of encoded messages, one line decoded. "We see you." The room went still. Sarah stared at the paper like it might bite. Hank folded it, tucked it under his desk's ceramic eagle, and looked out the window, as if expecting a shadow to move. That night, we heard engines, not the suit's sleek SUVs, but rattling trucks. Headlights hit the driveway, revealing a bulldozer, a backhoe, and 3 unmarked rigs with floodlights. Gerald stood in the glow, wearing a reflective vest like a wannabe general, holding a blueprint. Behind him, a rough-looking crew gripped sledgehammers, eyeing the barn like a prize. "You're trespassing," Hank barked, storming out in his bathrobe and boots. Gerald grinned. "This patch of your land 10 feet from the hedges unregistered." The county never zoned it. That barn's fair game for removal. I'm reclaiming it for the community. That's not how it works, Sarah muttered. Gerald waved to the crew. Start with the west wall. The first worker stepped forward with a saw and tripped a wire. A paint can dropped from the eaves, exploding in neon green. He yelped. Another hit a rigged sprinkler, doused in skunk spray. A third grabbed the doorknob and got a mild shock. Hank's barn was a fortress of pranks, built from years of outsmarting trespassers and raccoons. The yard became a slapstick war zone. Paint, glitter, syrup, and screaming workers fleeing a 76-year-old's booby traps. The police arrived. Gerald tried to spin it, but his crew was half gone, the rest sparkling like disco balls. An officer, who knew Hank from the VFW, asked if he'd used explosives. Hank handed him a bucket of marshmallows. Only emotional ones. Gerald was escorted off, but not before hissing. This barn's a danger. Something's coming, and you'll regret this. We laughed it off until the next day, when a letter arrived from a national preservation group. They'd seen a viral video of Gerald slipping in glitter and Hank quoting Patton with a squirrel on his shoulder. They wanted to designate the barn a historical landmark, safe from demolition, but open for public tours. Hank agreed, and the Cold War barn was born, complete with a guest book and Sunday lectures. The signals didn't stop. They grew louder, more complex. The suits set up shop in a neighbor's garage, their equipment humming. Sarah noticed something in the latest signal log, ran it through her custom software, and froze. It's a word, she said. Homecoming. She showed Hank. He didn't speak, just marked the water tower on a map. That night, the tower lit up, a surge of power blowing out streetlights and setting off every car alarm in Maple Grove. Whatever was out there wasn't just watching. It was here. The sky over Maple Grove turned a sickly purple, like a bruise spreading across the heavens, just before the power cut out. House by house, the street went dark, and a low hum rose not from the barn, not from the suit's gear, but from the ground itself, steady and alive. Sarah stood in the living room, her laptop flickering with a single word she hadn't typed, connecting. Hank was at the window, arms crossed, staring at the horizon like he'd seen this storm before. Nobody spoke. The air felt heavy, coordinated, wrong. Within an hour, the neighborhood was a circus. The suits rolled in with trucks hauling portable towers, servers, and antennas that turned our lawn into a tech convention. The mayor showed up, trailed by a local news crew sniffing out atmospheric anomalies tied to a historic barn. Cameras rolled, reporters babbled, and the frost carried a faint whiff of panic. But the barn stood firm, unshaken by the pulsing air or the vibrating power lines. It had survived blizzards, recessions, and now, whatever this was. Inside, the suits were laser-focused on decoding the latest signal from the water tower. Sarah fed the waveform into her software, her fingers flying. The output was stark. It begins at midnight. Midnight was 39 minutes away. Ellen tried her sister's Numberno signal. I cranked the emergency radio static. Hank stepped outside, lit a cigar, and stared at the sky. This ain't Cold War games anymore, he said. This is something else. The suits ordered an evacuation of the cul-de-sac. Most neighbors were already packing, cars peeling out with bikes half-strapped to roofs and dogs yapping. Gerald, for all his earlier bravado, was the first to bolt, lugging suitcases and muttering about lawsuits once the sky stops glowing. A few stayed. Us, the suits, and Mrs. Larson, who refused to abandon her cats and was last seen taping foil to her mailbox for signal protection. The suits clustered in the backyard, radios buzzing, tracking the signal's source. Sarah pointed to her map. The tower's not the origin anymore. It's a relay. The real source is closer, maybe underground, moving. That word moving in the air like a bad omen. Then we heard it. A thump from beneath the barn, then another. Hank didn't hesitate. He grabbed his old military flashlight, flipped back the rug, and opened the cellar hatch. Hear that? He asked. That's not pipes. That's footsteps. The suits followed, and so did we. The cellar had changed. A section of the brick wall was gone, revealing a tunnel that hadn't been there days ago. One suit knelt, scanning the edges. This isn't on our blueprints, he muttered. Hank glanced back. Wasn't here 50 years ago either. Someone's been busy. We descended, the air growing colder, the tunnel sloping deeper. Flickering lights ahead cast jagged shadows. At the end was a chamber, stone-walled, damp, with a metal desk in the center. A battery-powered lamp glowed yellow, illuminating a control console that looked ripped from a 1960s espionage flick. Dials, switches, a single chair. Someone had been here recently. A tape recorder sat on the desk. Hank hit play. Carl's voice, distorted but unmistakable, crackled through. If you're hearing this, I failed. But I didn't lie. The signal isn't Russian, it isn't Chinese, and it isn't even human. It's Frumer what we were before we forgot. The tape clicked off. Sarah stared at the console, her fingers brushing the controls. Lights blinked in sequence. A hidden drawer slid open, revealing a map with coordinates spanning the globe. Abandoned towers, Cold War bunkers, listening posts. They're all waking up, she whispered. The ground trembled, not violently, just enough to feel like something below was stirring, aware. Back in the barn, the suits were in chaos. Transmissions have spiked, one said. Every station on that map is active, hundreds of pulses across 5 continents. I asked what they were saying. Nothing we can translate, he replied. But they all end with the same signature. Sarah checked the waveform, her face paling. It's DNA, she said. The signal's tail is a genetic marker, scanning for a match. A chime sounded. The barn's new receiver blinked green. Match found. All eyes turned to Hank. He stood by the window, puffing his cigar, calm as ever. It's me, he said. What do you mean, you? Ellen demanded. They coded me into the first relay, Hank explained. A failsafe. My signature's in the logs. The system's been waiting for its original handler. He turned to Sarah. What now? She didn't answer. Hank stepped to the console, keyed in a message on the old transmitter. Listening. Identify. The reply was instant, flashing across every screen. Welcome home, Henry. A pulse of light shot from the water tower, piercing the clouds in a perfect circle. Screens went black, then rebooted, displaying a rotating symbolic spiral of numbers around a heartbeat. Sarah stared. That's not language. It's a countdown. Midnight, 24 hours. Until what? I asked. Hank's smile was grim. Until everything changes. The next morning, the suits doubled their presence. Trucks lined the street, unloading crates of gear labeled classified. The news crew lingered, now joined by a national outlet, their vans clogging the cul-de-sac. Neighbors who'd fled returned, drawn by curiosity or fear. Mrs. Larson handed out tinfoil hats, claiming they blocked the waves. The barn, now a landmark, drew gawkers who left notes in the guest book. Amazing. And is this Area 51? Hank spent hours with the suits, cross-referencing his logs with the new signals. Sarah built a program to track the countdown, her laptop humming as it parsed data. The spiral symbol appeared in every transmission, its numbers tightening like a noose. By noon, the suits confirmed the signal source was no longer the tower but a network of underground relays, possibly linked to the tunnel we'd found. It's not just active, one suit said. It's adapting. Ellen, who'd been holding it together, finally snapped. Adapting to what? What's coming? No one had an answer. Hank, though, was calm, almost eager. Whatever it is, it's been waiting a long time. We just opened the door. That afternoon, Sarah found a pattern in the DNA marker. It wasn't just Hank's, it was a hybrid, part human, part something else, like a key to a lock we couldn't see. She cross-checked it against public databases, finding faint matches in ancient genetic records, predating known civilizations. This isn't new, she said. It's old. Old. The countdown hit 12 hours. The hum in the ground grew louder, rattling windows. The suits prepped for containment, though they wouldn't say of what. Hank suggested we arm ourselves, not with guns, but with knowledge. He dug out his old journals, pages of scribbled frequencies and cryptic notes. One entry, dated 1973, read, "Heard it tonight." Not words, not code. It's alive. As night fell, the sky flickered again, the purple hue deepening. The barn's receivers screamed, overwhelmed by a flood of signals. Sarah's laptop crashed, then rebooted with a new message. Prepare. The suits radioed their superiors, voices tense. Hank lit another cigar, looked at me, and said, "Tom, you ever think you'd be fighting a war from your backyard?" I laughed, more from nerves than humor. Not exactly. Well, he said, get ready. Midnight's coming. The countdown ticked down to 3 hours, and Maple Grove was no longer a suburb, it was a battleground. The suits had turned the barn into a command center, their screens glowing with maps and waveforms. Outside, the purple sky pulsed like a living thing, and the ground's hum had become a steady throb, shaking loose dirt from the barn's rafters. News vans multiplied, their spotlights bathing the street in harsh white. Neighbors who'd stayed formed a ragtag militia of sorts, clutching flashlights and kitchen knives, half convinced they were defending their cul-de-sac from an alien invasion. Mrs. Larson patrolled with a megaphone, shouting about cosmic interference, while her cats yowled from her porch. Inside, Sarah's laptop was a lifeline, her software decoding fragments of the signal. The spiral symbol spun faster, its numbers collapsing into a single point. "It's not just a countdown," she said, her voice tight. "It's a convergence. Every relay on that map is syncing to this moment." She pointed to the screen, where coordinates blinked red, hundreds of them, from Siberian bunkers to Pacific atolls, all pulsing in unison. Hank pored over his old journals, cross-referencing entries with the suit's data. One page, dated 1974, stood out. Signal spiked at 3 a.m. Not Soviet. Not ours. Felt like it was looking for me. He showed it to the lead suit, a grim woman named Agent Carter, who nodded. "Your logs are the key, Henry. Whatever's coming, it's tied to you." Ellen, who'd been chain-drinking coffee, slammed her mug down. "Tied to him, how? What is this thing?" Carter didn't blink. "We don't know. The DNA marker suggests its humaner was long ago. It's been dormant, waiting for a trigger. Your barn was that trigger." "Great," I muttered. "We're ground zero for a sci-fi reboot." Hank ignored me, his eyes on the console. "If it's looking for me, let's give it what it wants." He typed another message. "Henry here. What do you want?" The reply came fast. "To return." The screens flickered, the spiral tightening. Sarah's software spat out a new translation. "Gate opens at midnight." "Gate?" Ellen whispered. "To where?" No one answered. The suits prepped for worst-case scenarios, their radios crackling with orders to secure the perimeter and contain anomalies. Hank, though, was calm, almost serene. He handed me a crowbar. "If this goes south, Tom, get Ellen and Sarah out. Don't look back." I nodded, my throat dry. Sarah kept working, her fingers a blur. She found a buried subroutine in the signal, a command loop designed to activate a physical device. "It's not just data," she said. "It's instructions. Something's being built or woken up right under us." With an hour to go, the ground shook harder, a deep rumble that cracked the barn's foundation. The suits traced it to the tunnel we'd found, now wider, its walls etched with faint, glowing lines that hadn't been there before. Carter led a team down, their flashlights catching glimpses of something metallic at the tunnel's endostructure, half-buried, pulsing with the same rhythm as the signal. Hank followed, ignoring Carter's protests. "This is my fight," he said. Sarah and I went too, against Ellen's tearful objections. The chamber had changed. The desk was gone, replaced by a circular platform, its surface covered in intricate carvings that glowed faintly. The console was now a hub, wires and circuits exposed, connected to the platform like veins. Above it, a faint shimmer hung in the air, like heat rising from asphalt. "It's a gate," Sarah breathed. "Like a portal." Carter's radio crackled. "All stations report activation. Global relays are at full power. We're out of time." The countdown hit 10 minutes. The shimmer solidified, a rippling membrane of light. Through it, shapes moved vague, humanoid, but wrong, their outlines bending in ways that hurt to look at. Hank stepped closer, his face unreadable. "Who are you?" he shouted. A voice answered, not from the gate but inside our heads, cold and clear. "We are the first. You called us home." "The first?" I asked, my voice shaking. Hank turned to me. "They're not aliens, Tom. They're user what we were, before we were human. They built this network, hid it, and waited. My barn was just one piece." The gate pulsed, the shapes growing sharper. Carter drew her sidearm, but Hank raised a hand. "Guns won't help. They're not invading. They're returning." He faced the gate. "What do you want with us?" The voice answered, "To merge. To reclaim what was lost." Sarah, still at the console, shouted, "I can shut it down. There's a kill switch in the code." Her fingers flew, pulling up a command buried in the signal's core. The gate flickered, the shapes recoiling. The voice grew louder, urgent. Do not interfere. This is destiny. Hank looked at Sarah, then at me. Do it, he said. Carter hesitated. If we stop it, we lose answers. This could be first contact or our past. It's not contact, Hank snapped. It's a takeover. They don't want to talk. They want to rewrite us. Sarah hit the command. The console sparked, the gate wobbled, and a scream not human, not animal tore through the chamber. The platform cracked, the glow fading. The shapes vanished, and the gate collapsed into a pinpoint of light, then nothing. The ground stopped shaking. The hum died. Upstairs, the suit's screens went dark, then rebooted with a single message. Connection terminated. We climbed out, exhausted, the barn still standing. The sky was clear, the purple gone. The suits swept the tunnel, finding only inert metal and broken carvings. The global relays went silent. Carter approached Hank, her face grim but respectful. You made the call, Henry. We'll clean up, but this stays classified. Hank nodded. Always does. The next morning, Maple Grove tried to return to normal. The news crews left, chasing a new story. Neighbors unpacked, their tinfoil hats discarded. The barn, now a protected landmark, drew tourists who snapped selfies and asked if Hank was a retired spy. Gerald, humiliated, moved to a condo downtown, his HOA dreams crushed. Mrs. Larson started a blog about suburban conspiracies, which got surprising traction. Hank, though, was quieter. He spent days in the barn, sorting his journals, as if waiting for another signal. Sarah kept her software running, just in case, but the relays stayed dead. Ellen baked pies for the neighbors, her way of apologizing for the chaos. I watched it all, wondering if we'd dodged a bullet or lost a chance to understand our past. A week later, Hank called us to the barn. He'd found a final tape in the cellar, missed in the chaos. It was Carl's voice, recorded before his arrest. If you stop them, they'll try again. Not tomorrow, not next year, but someday. They're patient. We're not. Hank burned the tape, his face set. We won this round, he said. That's enough for now. The barn became a symbol, not just of Cold War secrets, but of standing firm against forces human or otherwise that try to erase you. Hank gave his Sunday talks, mixing truth with tall tales, and the guest book filled with notes of awe. Sarah got a job offer from a tech firm, her software catching someone's eye. Ellen and I rebuilt the backyard, planting new azaleas where the backhoe had torn up the lawn. One night, as we sat on the porch, Hank lit a cigar and looked at the stars. You think we did the right thing, Tom? Shutting it down. I thought of the gate, the shapes, the voice promising destiny. Yeah, I said. We're not ready for that kind of homecoming. He nodded. Good. Because if they come back, we'll be ready. The barn stood, a quiet sentinel in a world that felt a little smaller, a little safer. Maple Grove went back to its routine: squirrels, mailboxes, Mrs. Larson's walks. But we knew the truth. History doesn't stay buried, and some doors, once opened, never fully close. Thank you for joining us on this wild ride through Maple Grove's hidden history. We hope the story of Hank's barn kept you on the edge of your seat and sparked some thoughts about the secrets we all carry. We'd love to hear your take in the comments below, especially on the themes of power and injustice. Was Hank right to defy the HOA's overreach? Should the family have fought to protect their history, even at the risk of chaos? And what about the bigger question? When faced with an unknown force, is it braver to confront it or shut it down? Share your stance, your stories, or just your reactions. Let's keep the conversation going. Your voice matters.